Chapter 248. Dao's face was as ugly as it could be. No matter how highly he'd overestimated Han Shuo, he'd never have guessed that Han Shuo's current strength was already so ridiculously frightening. Killing 2 harpies by himself was something that even Dior himself might not be able to do. Dao had nothing else to say after Dean Emma's confirmation. With so many people looking at him, he couldn't deny it even if he wanted to. He could only nod indignantly in the end and say to Emma, "Since the Honorable Dean has personally confirmed it, then Brian will officially graduate." Dao snorted darkly after he'd finished speaking. He gave a few instructions to a dark major teacher beside him and strode away. It looked like he wasn't in a good mood. The necromancy major students finally awoke from their shock after Dao left. They couldn't help but cry out in happiness after Lisa's cheers. Philide and the other dark major students didn't utter another word of bullshit as they slipped away with their tails between their legs. "How is this possible? How is this possible?" Fanny muttered to herself and looked incredulously at Han Shuo. She couldn't figure out how Han Shuo could kill 2 harpies by himself. Fanny had a feeling that Han Shuo's current strength was unfathomable. Fanny then suddenly remembered her promise with Han Shuo. Fanny had once said that as long as Brian advanced to Adept Mage, she could consider dating him. Now that half a year had passed, Han Shuo had suddenly descended upon the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force and successfully accomplished this feat with a calm and unruffled demeanor. With Fanny's understanding of Han Shuo, she knew that he would definitely mention this matter. Therefore, the unprepared Fanny's heart was in a mess. She blushed and looked at Han Shuo from afar, only to discover that Han Shuo was looking at her with a burning gaze. This made Fanny even more frantic. She hastily gave some instructions to Jean beside her and quickly disappeared as if she was fleeing. Han Shuo immediately knew what was going on when he saw Fanny leave. He chuckled lowly, pleased with himself, and didn't pay attention to the praises of Lisa and the other students beside him, planning to chase after Fanny's footsteps. "Brian, I have some matters to discuss with you alone. Come with me. Don't worry about your graduation qualifications, there shouldn't be any problems." Dean Emma smiled merrily when she saw that Han Shuo was about to leave. Han Shuo started slightly, a bit unsure of Emma's intentions. He thought to himself that the matter with Fanny wasn't urgent, so he nodded and agreed. He said a few words to Lisa and the others before following Dean Emma towards her office. Han Shuo arrived at Emma's office after a while and found a seat without any reservations. Han Shuo said with a smile, "Honored Dean, what business do you have with me?" "Haha, if I remember correctly, you shouldn't be over 18 years old right now. However, you're now an adept necromancer, and you even have the strength to kill a harpy. It's a bit inconceivable that you've gone from a child without any magical element to such heights in just a short year." Emma looked at Han Shuo with a smile and spoke unhurriedly. Han Shuo couldn't help but frown when he heard Emma's words. He was silent for a while before smiling faintly. "Indeed, even I feel that it's inconceivable. What does the honored dean mean by these words?" Shaking her head, Emma chuckled and said benevolently, "Child, don't overthink things. I don't have any ill intentions towards you. It's just that you're a student of my Babylon Academy of Magic and Force, and you're studying necromancy magic. You've brought glory to our academy now that you've achieved so much. Haha, I have to say that it's a miracle that you've gone from a child who knows nothing to someone who has the ability to kill 2 harpies in 2 years. What I can be sure of is that you must have encountered some strange events in these 2 years. Otherwise, it would be impossible for you to have such rapid progress. You haven't reported to the Dark Mantle in a long time. Candide once told me to pay attention and told you to make a trip to the Dark Mantle as soon as possible if you return to the academy. He seems to have a mission for you. In addition, I hope that you can properly handle your relationship with Fanny. There are some things that I can't say, but I'll just remind you that Fanny's father isn't easy to get along with. Be careful." Han Shuo breathed a sigh of relief after Emma's words. He hadn't thought that Emma would be a bit similar to Candide. He didn't know if it was because they were husband and wife, but she actually didn't show any ruthless desire to get to the bottom of things. From her tone, it seemed that she was very protective of him. Nodding, Han Shua smiled faintly. Don't worry, Dean, I'll definitely pay attention to your reminders. In addition, I'll report to the Dark Mantle as soon as possible. Alright, that's all I have to say. As for your education and identity, there shouldn't be any problems tomorrow. With me watching over you, Deo won't do anything. Haha, actually Deo isn't a bad person. It's just that you made him lose face last time, that's why he's targeting you. I hope you don't take it to heart. Got it. Without saying anything else, Han Shua left Emma's office. Han Shua didn't pay too much attention to Dark Archmage Deo. If nothing unexpected happened, he wouldn't have many opportunities to come here after graduating from the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. Naturally, he wouldn't have any contact with Deo. Of course, if Deo dared to court death, with the strength that Han Shua possessed, he wouldn't mind sending him on his way. After leaving Emma's office, Han Shua headed straight for Fanny's laboratory. Thinking that he would soon be able to see Fanny, Han Shua's heart was in turmoil. He was so excited that he couldn't control himself. He was very nervous, like a young man in love who was about to reveal his true feelings. When he arrived in front of Fanny's door, Han Shua took a deep breath and calmed the nervousness in his heart. He smiled and knocked. Master Fanny, may I come in? You may not. Contrary to Han Shua's expectations, Fanny directly refused Han Shua after hearing Han Shua's reply. This was something that had never happened before. Stunned, Han Shua smiled wryly. Why? I know that nothing good will come of your visit this time. Therefore, you should just stand outside the door, or disappear for half a year like last time. There was obvious resentment in Fanny's voice from within the laboratory. Anyone could hear the meaning behind Fanny's words. She was still complaining about Han Shua leaving without saying goodbye. Master Fanny, listen to my explanation. I really didn't do it on purpose. I was delayed by matters in Valen City this time and had no choice but to stay here. I didn't mean to deceive you. With Han Shua's current insight and experience, how could he not understand the meaning behind Fanny's words? He smiled wryly outside the laboratory and began to explain. Little pervert, I'll allow you to come in, but you're not allowed to touch me. Fanny hesitated for a moment, seeming to feel that it was a bit inappropriate to leave Han Shua outside the door. Hastily nodding his head, Han Shua made a solemn vow, of course, of course. It would be even more inappropriate if someone saw me outside and spread some bad rumors. Fanny seemed to feel that Han Shua's words made sense. The laboratory door creaked open and Fanny carefully peeked her head in, grabbing the dazed Han Shua and slamming the door shut. She then returned to the table in the center and sat down. She said seriously, "All right, what do you want from me?" Chuckling evilly, Han Shua walked rudely in front of Fanny and sat down. He then looked at Fanny with a smile. Master Fanny, are you trying to renege on your debt? With a straight face, Fanny forced herself to be calm as she flicked a glance at Han Shua and asked in confusion, what do I need to renege on? You once said that as long as I became an adept mage, you'd agree to be with me. Now that I've passed the adept mage test, I can be considered to have officially graduated from the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. From now on, there are no more barriers between us because of our identities. So, shouldn't you honor your promise? Han Shua didn't try to hide anything as he looked at Fanny with a burning gaze and asked with a smile. After Han Shua's words, Fanny could no longer maintain her pretense of being serious. She first glared fiercely at Han Shua as a red blush spread across her cheeks. She then laughed tenderly and chuckled, having long since prepared herself. I didn't say that I'd definitely agree to you, I only said that I'd consider it. Heh, I haven't even thought about it yet, what are you in such a hurry for? Fanny's current demeanor was charming and gorgeous, and the rosy blush on her cheeks added a bit of bashful beauty to her. After spending so much time with Fanny, Han Shua had long since understood that it wasn't that Fanny didn't have any feelings for him. Now that Fanny's attitude was both welcoming and rejecting, it only made Han Shua's heart itch even more. Heh. With a smirk, Han Shua instantly forgot the agreement before he came in. His body suddenly moved, and he was already behind Fanny. His big hands wrapped around Fanny's shoulders from behind, and he leaned towards Fanny's cheeks to steal a kiss. He grinned and said, "Could it be that you really want to renege on your promise? This isn't the moral character that a good teacher should have, okay?" Fanny only felt her vision blur, and then she saw Han Shuo disappear in front of her. Before she could react, she found that Han Shuo had already appeared behind her like a ghost, and even clasped her arm that was sitting in the chair, taking the opportunity to sneak a kiss on her. "You audacious little pervert, what did you guarantee when you came in?" Fanny was greatly embarrassed. The resentment that she had accumulated in the past 6 months had not disappeared, and she couldn't help but struggle and shout. When dealing with a woman, the most important thing was not to follow her rhythm. You had to take the initiative, and use both the mind and the body to attack and destroy the defenses in her heart. Han Shuo was no longer a virgin, and he had learned too much from Emily. In addition to the experiences from Clarendon's memories and Han Shuo's own feelings, he was no longer so passive when interacting with women. As Fanny struggled and shouted, Han Shuo's 2 hands were still firmly clasped around her body. He bent down, and his hot tongue lightly kissed Fanny's slender white neck. He softly whispered in Fanny's ear, "I've thought of you every day for the past 6 months. I wanted to see you every day, every night, every moment. I think you should know this, right? Really, the days when I'm not by your side are really boring. It's your promise that motivates me to train hard. The thought of being with you is like a curse, urging me to train day and night without slacking off. Today, I can advance to become an adept mage, all for the sake of being with you. Don't tell me you're heartless enough to hurt me." A series of low murmurs filled with sincerity and affection. The gentle voice was like a gentle breeze and drizzle, nourishing Fanny's withered heart. Han Shuo's hot tongue wandered wantonly, and it was more like a catalyst to destroy the defenses in Fanny's heart. It caused Fanny's struggling heart to slowly sink into the web of love that Han Shuo had woven. "Oh, Brian," Fanny murmured softly. Her eyes were already filled with tears at some point. Her originally struggling body went limp, and a sweet smile hung on her lips as she listened to Han Shuo's passionate words of love. "You know, I really can't live without you." In the end, Han Shuo wrapped his arms around Fanny and pulled her up from the chair. He turned around Fanny's body and stared at her passionately, saying with deep affection and tenderness. The defenses in her heart completely collapsed. Fanny cried out involuntarily and suddenly threw herself into Han Shuo's chest. Her 2 hands tightly wrapped around Han Shuo's strong back. She stood on her tiptoes and planted her fragrant lips on Han Shuo's big mouth. With a beauty throwing herself into his arms and her fragrant lips, Han Shuo naturally wouldn't be polite. He immediately came into intimate contact with her and carried out a fiery French kiss. For Fanny, Han Shuo truly adored her. From the moment he came to this world, he didn't know whether it was because of Brian's thoughts, or because of Fanny's kindness. In short, she did move Han Shuo, causing Han Shuo to be deeply infatuated with her, which had never changed. Even though there were earth-shaking changes later, even though Han Shuo's strength soared all the way, and even though he owned Emily and Phoebe who were as beautiful as Fanny, his initial and most sincere infatuation with Fanny had never been affected. Now, Han Shuo had already gotten used to everything in this world. He also understood that as long as he had enough strength, no matter what he wanted, it wouldn't be a difficult thing. Money, power, and beauties were indeed things that Han Shuo liked, and they were things that he could never have in his previous life. If one could have everything to their heart's content while living in this world, then why bother with all those messy matters and what others thought of them? Since Han Shuo had decided to indulge himself, then there was no need to be secretive. Chapter 249. Han Shuo and Fanny embraced for a while, but Han Shuo wasn't in a hurry to violate Fanny. Instead, he constantly expressed his true feelings with words of love. Only when Han Shuo discovered that Fanny had completely let down her guard against him did he take out a pill from his space ring and hand it over to Fanny. He smiled and said, "Eat this." "What is this?" Fanny had a blissful smile on her face. Her bright eyes sparkled with curiosity as she looked at Han Shuo and asked, The rebirth pill was round and translucent, emitting a delicate fragrance that gladdened the heart and refreshed the mind. It was like a brightly colored emerald pearl, refined by Han Shuo in the cemetery of death. It had the effect of allowing an ordinary person to be reborn. There were only 7 rebirth pills in a cauldron. Han Shuo had eaten one himself and was certain of its effects. This time, he planned to reforge Fanny's body and give her a pleasant surprise. "It's a great tonic," Han Shuo said with a smile. "You always like to mystify people, you bad thing." Fanny rolled her eyes at Han Shuo. She casually picked up the rebirth pill and popped it into her mouth without another word. Han Shuo was startled when he saw Fanny swallow it so quickly. He then suddenly said, "Hurry and sit down, don't think about anything else." Exerting force with both hands, Han Shuo pressed Fanny down onto the ground without any explanation. He then pressed both hands against the center of Fanny's back, the magical yuan already flowing into Fanny's body. "Oh, what did you give me to eat? Why does it feel like there's a ball of fire burning in my stomach?" Fanny was forced to sit on the ground by Han Shuo. When she felt the rebirth pill enter her body, it was as if a ball of fire had been ignited. Her body temperature skyrocketed and she cried out in a panic. Then, Fanny seemed to have gotten the wrong idea. She couldn't help but shout angrily as she struggled, "Damn it, you didn't give me that kind of drug, did you? How can you be so despicable?" When Fanny's thoughts went astray, her heart was in chaos. She was both disappointed and resentful towards Han Shuo. She began to struggle violently, wanting to break free from Han Shuo's restraints. Han Shuo turned pale with fright and immediately pressed his left hand on Fanny's shoulder, yelling urgently, "This isn't an aphrodisiac, I swear. Don't you trust me that much?" When these words were spoken, Fanny became a little more obedient. Only then did she feel that although her body was burning like a fire, there were indeed no thoughts of lust. With this, Fanny stopped struggling and hastily said, "You've always behaved poorly. That's why I misunderstood. I won't move now." Han Shuo didn't know whether to laugh or cry after hearing her words. He immediately changed his mind and realized that he had indeed behaved a little improperly in the course of his relationship with Fanny. It was understandable that Fanny would speculate so maliciously about him. "All right, don't talk anymore. Just meditate, calm your mind and don't let your thoughts run wild." Han Shuo let go of the hand on Fanny's shoulder and placed it on her back. He sent magical yuan into Fanny's body and helped her dissolve the effects of the aphrodisiac in her body. Clouds of dense smoke curled around the two as streaks of black lightning flowed from Han Shuo's palm into Fanny's body. Fanny, who was sitting upright, let go of everything and allowed Han Shuo to do whatever he wanted. This time, she had given Han Shuo complete trust. An hour later, Han Shuo let go with a smile and breathed a sigh of relief. He whispered into Fanny's ear, "How do you feel?" I want to go to the toilet." Fanny was a little shy as she said softly with a red face. Laughing heartily, Han Shuo said, "That's right. You'll constantly want to go to the toilet in the next 3 days. The impurities in your body will all be expelled in these 3 days. After 3 days, your body will be beyond your imagination. I'll come see you again then." A series of crisp crackling sounds suddenly sounded from within Fanny's body. Fanny seemed to be unable to bear it as she hastily stood up with a red face and shouted angrily, "Why does this sound like a laxative? You're too hateful." Fanny didn't wait for Han Shuo to say anything and hurriedly left. She pulled open the door and walked out, not daring to stay a moment longer. It was obvious that she couldn't hold it in any longer. After Fanny left, Han Shuo couldn't stop chuckling oddly and left as well. He used the familiar winding path in the back of the mountain to avoid the necromancy students and walked out of the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. Han Shuo's actions must have caused a stir after he returned today. After completing the procedures in 3 days, Han Shuo would no longer be considered a member of the academy. In order to prevent Lisa's group of students from chattering incessantly, it was more appropriate to leave through the back door. Han Shuo didn't immediately report to the Dark Mantle after leaving the academy. He hadn't returned for a long time anyways and was in no hurry to return in a day or two. Many carriages were currently parked in front of the Buzzed Merchant Guild's entrance. It looked quite lively. Han Shua walked straight inside after he arrived. Isn't this Mr. Brian? Why are you here? The two guards at the entrance both recognized Han Shua. When they saw Han Shua appear after not seeing him for a long time, one of them greeted him in surprise. Yes, I haven't been here for a long time. Has your young miss returned? Han Shua nodded with a faint smile and asked in a friendly manner. She returned very early. If Mr. Brian is here to do business with the young miss this time, why don't you come again next time? The guard had a pained expression as he hesitated for a moment and opened his mouth to speak. Oh? What's going on, is your young miss not home? Han Shua asked in confusion and then chuckled softly. No matter, I can go look for Fabian. Even if Fabian isn't here, I can still chat with Jack. Suddenly, Phoebe's angry rebuke sounded from inside. Han Shua blanked for a moment before his face darkened. Just what is going on? The guard smiled wryly as he looked at Han Shua and said kindly, it's a bit chaotic inside. That merchant called Cameron seems to want Miss Phoebe to agree to something, but the young miss hasn't agreed. Things don't seem to be going well. Thank you for your reminder. It looks like you don't know about my relationship with your guild. Han Shua responded and hurriedly walked inside, intending to see what was going on. Last time at Lawrence's residence, that merchant called Cameron seemed to have wanted Phoebe to join their merchant alliance, but had been rejected by Phoebe. Who would have thought that after so long, this Cameron still hadn't given up on that idea? Judging from Phoebe's angry voice, the situation inside must not be too pleasant right now. No matter what, Phoebe was now Han Shua's woman. Now that she seemed to be being bullied, Han Shua naturally couldn't sit idly by. Therefore, with a darkened face, Han Shua had already appeared at the place where Phoebe's angry voice had come from in the span of a few breaths. The group of 10 or so people were at the pavilion that Phoebe often stayed in. The crack in the fake mountain that Han Shua and Phoebe had squeezed through was still so familiar, but now there were a few unfamiliar faces, brimming with hostility. Cameron, whom they'd seen last time at the residence of Finance Minister Evie, and a few other unfamiliar faces. These people were either richly dressed merchants or highly skilled mages and swordsmen. All of them had unfriendly expressions on their faces as they looked at Phoebe, Fabian, and the others, as if they were ready to fight at the slightest disagreement. In the surroundings were a few guards of the Buzzed Merchant Guild. Each and every one of them was filled with indignation, and the weapons in their hands had already been unsheathed. It seemed that as long as Phoebe gave the order, they would immediately fight to the death with them. Brian, when did you return? Phoebe's beautiful eyes suddenly lit up as she looked at Han Shua, wild with joy, and exclaimed in surprise. Humph, he's just a pretty boy, what use is he? A burly fellow, whose badge on his chest clearly indicated that he was a senior swordsman, flicked a disdainful glance at Han Shua and shouted coldly. It looked like he knew a bit about Han Shua and Phoebe. Oh, is that so? Han Shua laughed oddly and then mocked, then, why don't you take a punch from this pretty boy? Han Shua, who had long since been in a bad mood, threw out a punch as soon as he'd finished speaking. There were no ripples of fighting aura, nor did there seem to be any frightening momentum. Even the speed of the punch was neither fast nor slow, and it looked soft and powerless. Unsurprisingly, the senior swordsman still had a look of disdain on his face as he said coldly, a pretty boy all right. Even the punch you threw out is so soft and powerless. The man then raised his hand and a sinister smile appeared at the corners of his mouth as he threw a punch at Han Shua's incoming punch. It looked like he intended to seriously injure Han Shua with one punch and intimidate the surrounding Buzzed Merchant Guild guards. The merchants who'd come with Cameron all wore relaxed smiles on their faces. They stared at Han Shua as if they were waiting to see him make a fool of himself, as if Han Shua would definitely be injured. On the other hand, on Phoebe's side, Fabian had an excited expression. Having seen Han Shua's methods, Fabian had reason to believe that this punch would be very interesting. Phoebe, on the other hand, had an icy expression on her face as the corners of her mouth hooked up in a vicious arc. A crisp crack rang out as the senior swordsman, with the sinister smile on his face, the bones in his right hand, which had collided with Han Shua's fist, made a series of disorderly sounds as he screamed like ghosts and howled like wolves. His valiant body stumbled backwards from the strong impact. When he landed on his butt, large mouthfuls of fresh blood flowed uncontrollably from his mouth. Even his shrill cries were muffled by the blood as he looked at Han Shua in terror and howled miserably. Chapter 250. Han Shua's fist contained the terrifying explosive power of magical energy. Not only did the blood vessels and tendons of the senior swordsman who had previously ridiculed him explode, even his bones cracked. From now on, this person's right arm could be said to be ruined. Han Shua grinned mischievously as he callously said, "If you dare to have a foul mouth again, then leave your life here today." The senior swordsman's mouth uncontrollably overflowed with blood. He looked at Han Shua with extreme fright and couldn't utter a complete sentence. He was obviously intimidated by Han Shua. Beside Cameron was a space archmage with a sinister appearance. He wore a brown magic robe and had many pockmarks on his face. His eyes flickered as he looked at Cameron. Cameron, whose aura had been obstructed, nodded slightly, seeming to agree with this space archmage's suggestion. This space archmage with a face full of pockmarks was the strongest among those who had come with Cameron. When he saw Cameron nod his head, he coldly twitched his mouth and then quickly chanted a magic incantation. Suddenly, the entire space rippled like waves in the water. Fierce magic elements filled the entire space in an instant, and a mysterious binding force followed. The space seemed to have been imprisoned, and everyone couldn't move their limbs. Soon after, the sinister space archmage chanted another magic incantation. The entire flat space was like a piece of glass that had been cut by a blade. With Cameron at the center, the invaders were completely separated from the confined space after a few flashes of white light. Refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. "You're courting death." The space archmage's voice was like a sharp weapon rubbing against glass, ear-piercing and numbing. He coldly looked at Han Shua's group as he spoke. "Mr. Aubrey, your skills are indeed marvelous." After Cameron's space was cut out, Cameron's group recovered from their confined state. Cameron laughed heartily as he spoke. "No need to be polite. I was only acting according to Duke Ashburn's orders." The space archmage called Aubrey was just as proud of Cameron's flattery as he yelled with a straight face. "This kid named Brian was once involved with the Betteridge family's Han at the Empire's finance minister's banquet. Wouldn't it be a bit bad if we also captured him?" Cameron pointed at Han Shua and said to Aubrey with some hesitation. Raising his head with a sneer, Aubrey disdainfully glanced at Han Shua and said, "What can this brat do? Do you think our Duke Ashburn is afraid of that old fellow Han?" With a smile on his face, Cameron flattered, That's right. Since that's the case, let's capture all of them and release them after I've taken over the Buzzed Merchant Guild." "Yes, this matter must be done quickly. His Excellency the Duke is getting impatient. Within a short period of time, all the large merchant guilds in the Empire must be in your hands. If the small merchant guilds without any foundation dare to disobey, just kill them all. We can't wait." Aubrey's nose was in the air, seemingly disgusted with these merchants as he coldly instructed. "Understood. How could I dare not do my best when working for His Excellency the Duke?" Cameron vowed solemnly with a face full of loyalty. Nodding his head, Aubrey said, "All right, no more nonsense. I'll tie them up one by one and make it convenient for you to bring them out of the Buzzed Merchant Guild." "It'll be convenient for you to bring them out of this Buzzed Merchant Guild. Just imprison this woman called Phoebe. Don't have any other ideas. Otherwise, if you anger her master, you'll be the one to suffer in the end." How could Cameron dare to say no? He repeatedly nodded his head to express his understanding. He looked at Phoebe with a somewhat astonished gaze, seemingly not understanding the origin of Phoebe's master. Even Duke Ashburn, who held great power in the Empire, had to be apprehensive of this person's existence. Aubrey took a deep breath and shook his left hand that was hidden in his sleeve. His space ring faintly lit up and a blue jade magic staff appeared in his left hand. He opened his mouth, intending to chant a magic incantation. At this moment, the space with Han Shuo at the center suddenly exploded. A faint, cold light snaked past like lightning. The stiff bodies of Phoebe and the others who were imprisoned behind Han Shuo all loosened. When the faint, cold light circled around his body and returned to his palm, a cold, fierce aura suddenly overflowed from Han Shuo's body. Han Shuo's expression was calm and unruffled. He stared at Archmage Aubrey and opened his mouth to ask Phoebe, "Phoebe, what should we do with these people? How is this possible? Just who are you? How could you break my imprisonment space?" Aubrey's expression was terrified. He didn't dare to accept this reality and shouted loudly. He gripped the magic staff in his left hand tightly, preparing to attack again at any time. Cameron and the other merchants were also shocked. They loudly yelled for their guards to protect them. Each and every one of them shrank within their guards and looked at Han Shuo with some fear. To be able to break a space archmage's imprisonment space, this kind of strength was definitely not something that the guards beside them could deal with. They deeply understood this, so they were on edge and on guard. Phoebe's expression was a bit unsightly. She hatefully glared at Cameron and the others before letting out a dejected sigh and said, "Let them go." Han Shuo stared blankly. The other party had already bullied them, but Phoebe actually swallowed the insult. This didn't seem to be in line with Phoebe's character. Then he thought of the name Duke Ashburn and faintly understood something. A wave of anger overflowed from his heart. Han Shuo shouted with a cold expression, "Are we going to let them off so easily? Let them go." Phoebe's voice was a bit powerless as she sighed softly. "Huh, what can you do? Duke Ashburn's power is monstrous in the Empire. How can you little merchants go against him?" Aubrey was extremely pleased with himself. He laughed wildly as he walked towards the door. A person who could break a space archmage's imprisonment space definitely wasn't weaker than a spellcaster. With Han Shuo here who could go toe-to-toe with him, and Phoebe who he knew of, Aubrey knew that it was impossible to successfully complete the mission this time. Naturally, he wasn't willing to continue staying here. Cameron and the others naturally didn't dare to linger when they saw Aubrey walk out. They turned around without the slightest hesitation, glanced fearfully at the murderous Han Shuo, and followed Aubrey out with trepidation. "Halt!" Suddenly, Han Shuo roared. His entire body was shrouded in a vicious aura. A cold and cruel aura surged out like a breached dam. The extremely evil and cruel aura rushed towards the group of people who were planning to leave. Under this terrifying aura, even Aubrey's forehead was drenched in cold sweat. His body stiffened as he stood there, not daring to move. As for the merchants like Cameron, their bodies were shivering. Their backs were already drenched in sweat, as if they had been drenched in rain. Han Shuo was like a vicious beast that could go berserk at any time. He was staring at them with bloodthirsty eyes. Perhaps if they were careless, they would be torn to shreds. "Brian, this is the Buzzed Merchant Guild. I beg of you." Phoebe was shocked. After 4 months, Han Shuo's strength had obviously skyrocketed. The terrifying aura emanating from his body now made Phoebe both happy and shocked. She was happy that Han Shuo's strength had greatly increased, so her own safety would be more guaranteed in the future. She was shocked that she couldn't predict Han Shuo's temperament. He now had the strength to heavily injure this group of merchants. If he really disregarded everything and made a move, it was very likely that it would bring disaster to the Buzzed Merchant Guild. Therefore, she was half happy and half worried as she hurriedly begged. Taking a deep breath, Han Shuo understood Phoebe's meaning from the 5 words that Phoebe had deliberately emphasized, Buzzed Merchant Guild. No matter what, making a move in such a place would bring great trouble to Phoebe. This was also the capital of the Empire. Most of the time, it wasn't something that could be solved with blind slaughter. With a sway of his body, Han Shuo had already appeared behind Aubrey. He reached out his hand and patted Aubrey's shoulder, saying coldly, "Aubrey, was it? I'll remember you. Please remember me too." Anyone who dares to make a move against me will pay the price sooner or later. As Han Shua spoke, the hand that had patted Aubrey's shoulder emitted two faint red and purple lights from the middle and index fingers of Han Shua's hand. Under the cover of his palm, they entered Aubrey's body. At this moment, Aubrey was scared out of his wits. When Han Shua had yelled, "Stop," he had already prepared to make a move at any time. However, Han Shua's ghostly speed had completely destroyed his defenses. Before he could even react, Han Shua had appeared behind him out of thin air, and then he felt Han Shua's large hand land on his shoulder. Even an archmage would have no chance of winning against a fellow with such terrifying destructive power. Therefore, Aubrey's aura stopped and he didn't say a single word. He just stood there obediently, listening to Han Shua's icy threats and feeling the frightening murderous intent when Han Shua patted his shoulder. It was precisely because of this nervousness that he was on tenterhooks that he didn't calm down and sense anything out of the ordinary. When the two auras, one cold and one hot, concealed themselves in his body, he didn't notice them at all. "Alright, you damned bastards, now get the hell out of here." After planting the poison of ice and fire in Aubrey's body, Han Shua walked towards Phoebe with a callous expression. When he arrived at Cameron's side, he casually patted the frightened Cameron. A purple light flashed, and Han Shua indifferently said, "You be careful too." Then, Han Shua stood at Phoebe's side, withdrawing the murderous aura that seemed to have materialized from his body. Aubrey and the others didn't dare to say another word and hurriedly left in a panic. After taking a trip to the gates of hell, these people had a deep fear of Han Shua in their hearts. After these people left, Phoebe looked at Han Shua apologetically and said somewhat timidly, "I'm sorry, these people were following Duke Ashburn's orders. If something happened to them in our guild, it would be very difficult to handle." Nodding with a smile, Han Shua didn't seem to have the murderous aura from before and had recovered his usual indifference. He said, "Don't worry, nothing will happen to them in the Bust Merchant Guild. However, I guarantee that they won't have it easy." Phoebe stared blankly for a moment before crying out in alarm, "You want to assassinate them?" With today's unforeseen event, if they were assassinated not long after returning, everyone would know that it was us who did it. This isn't a good idea. The corners of his mouth hooked into a secretive smile as Han Shua comforted, "Don't worry, am I such a person who can't see the big picture? All of you can leave first, I have some things to discuss with Brian alone." Phoebe looked at the surrounding guards, as well as Fabian and a few other trusted aides of the Merchant Guild, and ordered with a somewhat distressed expression. After experiencing the unforeseen event earlier, the guards and trusted aides of the Merchant Guild seemed to have once again recognized the relationship between the two of them. Under Phoebe's orders, they didn't say anything more and dispersed in different directions, disappearing from the pavilion not long after. What exactly happened? After those people left, Han Shua asked in a soft voice. Seeing that there was no one around, Phoebe threw herself into Han Shua's arms and used all her strength to hug Han Shua tightly. She then murmured softly, "It's so good to have you by my side." Afterwards, the two of them held each other tightly as they briefly described their encounters after they'd separated in the Valley of Sunshine. They had a general understanding of each other's whereabouts during this period of time. Han Shua also understood from Phoebe that because he and Phoebe had stayed in the Valley of Sunshine for a period of time, the Bust Merchant Guild had no one to rely on and had been taken over by a group of merchants led by Cameron. "Alright, I know what I'm doing now." Han Shua patted Phoebe's shoulder and comforted her as he took out a rebirth pill and handed it to Phoebe, "Eat this." In order to prevent a repeat of last time's encounter, Han Shua briefly explained some of the effects of the pill to prevent her from mistaking it for an aphrodisiac or laxative like Fanny. When Phoebe rolled her eyes at Han Shua and ate the rebirth pill, Han Shua also helped Phoebe refine the pill's effects. He left the Bust Merchant Guild to report to the Dark Mantle as Phoebe hurriedly looked for the toilet. The unfamiliar experts that were following him spread out one by one, either openly or covertly following behind Lawrence. They should be carefully protecting Lawrence's safety. To the Northern Rose Garden. Lawrence instructed the coachman as soon as he sat down in the carriage. What place is that? Han Shua was practically dragged onto the carriage by Lawrence. He couldn't help but ask after the carriage had left. Heh, you'll know when we get there. Don't worry too much for now. Tell me, where have you been having fun after we parted ways? Lawrence smiled mysteriously and asked Han Shua. Nothing much. I just stayed in the Valley of Sunshine for a while and went to the dark forest to hunt a few magical creatures. Han Shua smiled faintly and concealed everything as he replied easily. It can't be that simple. I heard junior sister Phoebe say that you did many shocking things in the Valley of Sunshine. Heh, do you really think I'm so ignorant and ill-informed after you caused such a ruckus in the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band? Lawrence slanted his eyes and curled his lips as if he didn't see him as a brother. Heh, it's really nothing much. Speaking of your junior sister Phoebe, you're a bit lacking as her senior brother. Phoebe's merchant guild was bullied and you didn't help her at all. Han Shua raised an eyebrow and turned the tables on Lawrence. Lawrence was startled by these words and asked Han Shua with a puzzled frown, "What's going on?" Han Shua stared closely at Lawrence a few times and hesitated, asking in surprise, "You don't know? This junior sister of mine doesn't like owing favors and doesn't want to trouble others with anything. I know of her bad temper, but I really don't know what's going on." Lawrence calmly said. So it's like this. Cameron's Merchant Alliance wants to annex the Boost Merchant Guild. Cameron seems to be under Duke Ashburn's protection and almost made a move at the Boost Merchant Guild, directly capturing Phoebe. Han Shua's face turned cold as he spoke gloomily. Suddenly enraged, Lawrence suddenly slapped the carriage's handle and coldly snorted, "Duke Ashburn is indeed sparing no effort for Charles. This kind of method is really too vile." Pausing for a moment, Lawrence sighed and said, "Phoebe is really too much. I could have helped with this kind of matter but she didn't tell me. If it wasn't for you telling me, she would definitely have been annexed by Cameron's Merchant Guild." Through the Dark Mantle's intelligence, Han Shua already had a general understanding of Lawrence's strength. He knew that Lawrence had made a trip to Valen City with him and that the former Griffin Legion's vice commander who was inclined to him had already grasped the power of Valen City and become the new commander of the Griffin Legion. In addition, Lawrence was deeply favored by His Majesty. If he could be recognized as a prince in a proper manner, he really did have hopes of becoming the king. "Brian, you've offended Ashburn. It looks like it'll be difficult for us to not become good friends." Lawrence looked deeply at Han Shua and said, "I currently have a good position in my hands. If you're willing, I can lend you a hand and allow you to quickly rise up in the army. This doesn't conflict with your identity in the Dark Mantle. What do you think?" Chapter 254. Hearing that Phoebe's master was also here, Han Shua was even more astonished. Phoebe had reached the realm of Swordmaster at such a young age. Last time when Cameron and the others went to Boost, Aubrey thought that he had captured Phoebe and said that he had to treat Phoebe well in order to avoid angering his master. As Duke Ashburn's subordinate, Aubrey's actions represented Duke Ashburn. Even Duke Ashburn, who held monstrous power in his hands, was so apprehensive of Phoebe's master. It could be imagined that this person definitely wasn't simple. While walking with Lawrence, Han Shua released the 3 Yin demons and passed through the passage ahead, planning to imprint this underground existence into his heart. However, as the Yin demons wandered all over, Han Shua discovered that there were all kinds of barriers spread out below. Some invisible barriers obstructed the Yin demons' prying. It seemed that the defenses below weren't just ordinarily tight. The space below the Rose Garden is twice as large as the surface. I'll bring you around in detail in the future. Today, let's meet my master first." Lawrence looked at Han Shua complacently, slowly revealing his strength to Han Shua. It seemed that he wanted to tell Han Shua that cooperating with him was absolutely the right choice. After passing through a narrow passage, Han Shua felt that he had already penetrated more than 10 meters underground. Afterwards, the dusky scene suddenly brightened. There were 4 intersecting paths with Han Shua and Lawrence at the center. There were bright lamps placed in the surroundings, illuminating the 4 passages as bright as day. "Follow me." Lawrence walked to the left and led the way for Han Shuo. When they arrived at a white jade door, Lawrence once again used a scroll to open the barrier binding the stone door. When a white light flashed, the stone door automatically opened and Lawrence brought Han Shuo in. "Young Master Lawrence." Suddenly, an extremely ugly old man with a face full of scars appeared and bowed towards Lawrence. This old man reeked of blood. Who knew how many people he had killed? He had sensed it the moment Han Shuo and Lawrence appeared. The closer he got to this old man, the denser the nauseating stench became. Lawrence was obviously not used to it. The calm smile on his face had long since disappeared. He said in a dry voice, "Grandpa Ballins, is my master inside?" The strange old man named Ballins stood up straight with his hunched body. He raised his head and glanced at Lawrence with his grayish-brown eyes. He said indifferently, "Inside, but master is currently cultivating." "Then, I'll wait outside for a while." As Lawrence spoke, he had already walked past Ballins and quickly took a few steps forward, as if unwilling to get too close to him. This stone room was the size of a basketball court. There were many grooves dug into the walls, and many daily necessities were placed on them. However, the most abundant was still a large amount of alcohol. All kinds of fine alcohol filled the stone grooves, as if it was a warehouse for fine alcohol. After Han Shuo came in, he first swept his gaze around the surroundings, and then focused his attention on the old man, Ballins. This old man's face was densely covered in scars, as if he had been slashed by a sharp weapon. He looked as terrifying as a malicious spirit from hell, and the strong stench of blood on his body was obvious. Just standing there gave people a strong sense of impact. Not only was this person's hands stained with blood, but his strength was also absolutely top-notch. He should be an expert a level higher than Phoebe. Otherwise, the aura on his body wouldn't be so strong. A person at the level of a great swordmaster wouldn't be a nameless person in any country. Han Shuo was a bit surprised that he was serving Lawrence's master in this secret room that never saw the light of day. Chapter 255. How has little Phoebe been doing recently? I heard that she stayed with you in the Valley of Sunshine for a period of time and even did some interesting things. The old man narrowed his eyes and asked in a soft voice. She has already safely returned to the Empire from the Valley of Sunshine. However, she doesn't seem to be doing well at the moment. From the old man's words, it seemed that he wasn't clear about Phoebe's current situation. Han Shuo couldn't help but explain. What happened? The old man furrowed his brows and asked with some concern. Teacher, it's like this. Lawrence hastily opened his mouth and rushed to describe what had happened. He then said with a wry smile, you also know that little junior sister doesn't like to trouble people. She didn't tell me about this matter. That old fellow Ashburn is getting more and more unbridled. He clearly knows that Phoebe is my disciple, yet he still dares to be so impudent. It seems that I should go and have a chat with him. The old man had an angry expression as he lightly snorted. When Lawrence saw that the old man was angry, not only was he not anxious at all, he instead revealed a trace of delight and hastily said, Teacher, you also know that my father's health is getting worse and worse. Right now, my brothers are all making preparations. Lord Duke has spared no effort for Charles. Him daring to do this is indeed not giving teacher face. Han Shuo was silent, his torchlight gaze roaming over the two's faces. He suddenly understood something and then became even more silent. The old man lightly laughed and looked thoughtfully at Lawrence. He nodded and said, I know what I'm doing. All right, let's not talk about these matters for now. Since you've come to see me, did you bring any good wine? Of course, I wouldn't dare to disappoint you no matter what. Lawrence chuckled. He took out a bottle that was sparkling and translucent like jade, filled with fine wine that was as red as blood. He respectfully handed it over and said, This is a special wine from a small town in Kasi Empire. It is called Redbud Blood. Have a taste, master. Han Shua knew that Lawrence's master must be a wine lover from the many types of alcohol placed in the waiting hall. Now that he saw it, it was indeed so. His thoughts raced as Han Shua recalled the fine wine brewed by the dwarves in the dark forest. He thought for a moment and took out a bag of wine from his space ring, handing it over respectfully and smiling. This bag of wine was brewed by the dwarves in the dark forest. It may not be all that precious, but it's much stronger than some of the fine wines in the empire. Hearing Han Shua's words, the old man looked at Han Shua with interest. He picked up the bag of wine, twisted it open and smelled it. He immediately smiled and nodded to Han Shua. What a thoughtful child. The wine brewed by the dwarves is naturally not bad. I can feel it just by smelling it. Waving his hand, the old man took the wine that Han Shua and Lawrence had handed over and said, "All right, Lawrence, I'll remember your matter. You can leave now, I'll drink first." Han Shua was astonished, not knowing what was going on. However, Lawrence gave Han Shua a meaningful look, indicating that Han Shua shouldn't ask so many questions and should leave with him. Afterwards, Lawrence brought Han Shua to the hall where Balans was. When Balans saw Han Shua appear, he stared at Han Shua with sparkling eyes and said, "Can you tell me how you know how to use murderous aura? This is a martial technique that I've trained in. I can't explain it to you, I'm very sorry." Han Shua, of course, couldn't tell him this kind of demonic secret technique. "Grandpa Balans, we'll be leaving first. I'll have to trouble you to take care of the rose garden." When Lawrence passed by Balans, his footsteps suddenly sped up. It seemed that he really wasn't used to the pungent smell of blood on Balans's body. "Oh right, you're called Brian, right?" Balans suddenly asked as Han Shua and Lawrence went back the way they'd come. His body slightly paused. Han Shua turned back to look at Balans and politely replied, "That's right." Nodding, Balans pulled the corners of his mouth and said, "We'll meet again. I like the smell on your body." "Heh, that kind of evil murderous aura." Han Shua was stunned. Just as he was about to say something, he was forcefully pulled away by Lawrence and disappeared in a few steps. Under Lawrence's guidance, the two returned to the quiet hall above. Letting out a light breath, Lawrence explained, "My master is called Karel Ascot. He possesses the strength of a sacred swordmaster and has made outstanding contributions to the empire. He has an extremely high reputation in the empire and can directly enter and exit the palace. My father trusts him a lot. Although I'm his disciple, he didn't clearly express his support for me. This makes me very puzzled. But I know that he loves junior sister Phoebe very much. Even this rose garden used to belong to the Bust Merchant Guild. Because he and Phoebe's father were old friends, due to some special reasons, this rose garden was managed by my master after his death. My master then passed it to me. Grandpa Balans used to be a famous assassin. Old Lucky was his personal disciple. I don't know why he followed my master. The smell of blood on his body is so heavy, I think you can imagine how many people he has killed. Every time I get close to him, I can't help but want to vomit. Therefore, I always stay far away from him. Otherwise, if I really vomit, I think he would be very unhappy." Although Lawrence was Carol's disciple, perhaps it was because of his identity as a prince that he didn't focus on martial arts, but rather on various strategies and military talents. As a result, his strength didn't appear to be very high. It was normal for him to feel uncomfortable when facing a person like Balans. Although he already knew that Phoebe's master was definitely extraordinary, Han Shua was still endlessly shocked after Lawrence confirmed his identity. As a member of the Dark Mantle, coupled with Han Shua's deliberate inquiries, he now had a good understanding of some of the Empire's overt and covert situations. It was naturally impossible for him to not have heard of a person like Karel Ascot. Karel Ascot was born a commoner, but he was a genius. He graduated from the Babylon Swordsman Academy with the fastest speed and best results. He traveled the continent with the strength of a senior swordsman, experiencing hundreds of battles in various countries and rising to fame. When he returned to the Lancelot Empire, he already possessed the strength of a great swordmaster. Afterwards, he received the invitation of the previous emperor to teach at the Babylon Swordsman Academy with the identity of Dean. When war broke out in the Lancelot Empire, not only did Corell nurture many talents for the empire, he also personally went out to defeat a few provocative experts from the enemy countries. When his reputation was at its peak, he resigned from his position as Dean of the Swordsman Academy and went to the depths of the Dark Forest to train for 10 years. When the empire was facing imminent danger from the invasion of the Kasi Empire, Corell appeared with the strength of a sacred swordmaster and killed 3 great swordmasters from the Kasi Empire. This raised the morale of the Lancelot Empire and led to the empire's victory in that battle. For many years after that, all the citizens of the empire, including the current emperor, treated Corell Ascot as the protector of the Lancelot Empire. Although he didn't have an official position, he could influence the emperor's decisions. Several of his personal disciples were involved in politics or the military, and had instead grasped great authority. It's actually him, no wonder. Han Shua couldn't help but cry out in surprise when he ran through this information in his mind. I'm bringing you to see him this time so that he can get to know you. As long as you leave a good impression on him and he puts in a few good words for you in front of my father, your days of meteoric success will not be far off. Lawrence's face was solemn as he said sincerely. I understand what you mean. Han Shua nodded with a smile. Let's go, business is done. I'll take you to have some fun now. Lawrence saw that Han Shua understood and didn't say anything else. He pulled Han Shua away from this quiet, unguarded place and arrived at the liveliest area of the Rose Garden, which was bustling with noise. Young Master Lawrence, do you need a private room? A middle-aged man wearing a fitting butler's attire, who should be the manager of the Rose Garden, asked with a smile when he saw Lawrence. Of course, it's the room that I always ask for. Help me arrange the best service so that my friend can enjoy himself to the fullest. Lawrence instructed straightforwardly. Suddenly, Lawrence's expression changed as he looked behind Han Shua. His originally cheerful expression turned murderous. Hi, Lawrence. I'm so happy to run into you. A voice suddenly came from behind Han Shua. It sounded full of joy. Turning around, Han Shua saw a luxuriously dressed young man about 25 or 26 years old walking over with a few obviously high-born pleasure seekers. This young man was slightly taller than Lawrence. His appearance was handsome and robust, and he had the awe-inspiring aura of a superior as he walked. The pleasure seekers around him obviously saw him as their leader. They all had flattering smiles on their faces as they looked at him. They even bowed slightly, further emphasizing his noble status. I don't want to see you. Lawrence's expression didn't look too good as he looked coldly at this person. Haha, Lawrence, you're becoming more and more impolite. According to the rules of the Empire, shouldn't you at least greet me when you see me? The tall, muscular young man looked at Lawrence with ridicule and said with a fake smile. His cheeks trembling, Lawrence glared hatefully at the man, then said helplessly, Greetings, Your Highness. Chapter 256. It was actually eldest Prince Charles. Han Shua glanced at him from the corner of his eyes and a thought suddenly popped up in his head, the owner of the Rose Garden is Lawrence. The surrounding mages and guards should all listen to the orders of that murderous Balans. This eldest Prince Charles has come here to seek pleasure and doesn't know that he has already entered deep into the tiger's den. If Lawrence can obtain the support of his master Corell, then wouldn't he be able to silently get rid of Charles? Very good, very good. Charles first laughed complacently before withdrawing his smile and coldly mocked, You better dispel your thoughts as soon as possible. Otherwise, you might not even know how you died. After saying this, Charles even provoked him in a low voice, Little bastard. Let's go, let's enjoy ourselves to the fullest. Turning his back, Charles laughed heartily and left with a few flatterers behind him, no longer looking at Lawrence. Lawrence's face was distorted from anger as he clenched his fists so tightly that the veins on the back of his hands were visible. Lawrence's entire body trembled uncontrollably as dense killing intent shot out of his eyes. He glared viciously at Charles's back as he left, even his breathing became much heavier. Looking at Lawrence's posture, it seemed like he could go berserk at any moment. Han Shua was really afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself and would risk his life against Charles without a care for anything else. As an illegitimate child, the most vicious curse he could muster was none other than the word bastard. When this vicious curse came from the person he hated the most, the power immediately increased tenfold. It was no wonder that even the scheming Lawrence almost couldn't control himself. Patting Lawrence's shoulder, Han Shua consoled, "Forget it, we have to take revenge sooner or later. There's no rush. I want to kill him with my own hands, I must kill him with my own hands." Lawrence gnashed his teeth as he muttered with a malevolent expression. Isn't this Mr. Aubrey and Mr. Cameron? The Rose Garden was indeed a lively place to squander money. Crown Prince Charles had just left when Cameron and Aubrey, whom Han Shua had met at the Buzzed Merchant Guild, walked in with a group of merchants. "Damn it, you despicable bastard! What the hell did you do to us?" Aubrey couldn't help but curse angrily when he saw Han Shua. It was the warm spring season, but Aubrey and Cameron were a bit strange. Aubrey was wearing a thick fur coat, and his body was tightly wrapped up. He was still standing there shivering, and his face was frozen blue and purple. On the other hand, Cameron was the exact opposite. In such a temperate weather, he seemed to be in a sauna. His thin clothes were drenched in sweat, and when he opened his mouth to speak, he couldn't help but gasp for breath. His face was flushed, and it was obvious that he couldn't endure the heat. Perhaps to neutralize it, the two strangely dressed fellows walked over hand in hand. It was even more peculiar for two grown men to appear in a place like the Rose Garden while holding hands. The two people who had been poisoned by the ice and fire poisons would have their bodies flare up alternately. Their bodies would be extremely cold one moment and extremely hot the next. This kind of repeated pain would torment the three of them until the poisonous flames Han Shua had left behind dissipated. Han Shua looked at the two with disdain and said with disgust, "Two grown men walking hand in broad daylight. How disgusting! Damn it, what poison did you put in our bodies? You evil, despicable bastard!" Aubrey's teeth chattered as he shouted while trembling. Lawrence, who had been extremely angry, felt a bit better when he saw the two appear. He chuckled as he shook his head and ridiculed, "People with such special hobbies should be sneaky. You guys are so open and aboveboard. Public morals are degenerating with each passing day. Brian, I won't let you off." Aubrey glared hatefully at Han Shua and opened his mouth to threaten him. As he spoke, the poisons of ice and fire alternated, and the temperature of his body, which was as cold as an ice cave, soared. He hastily and skillfully removed the fur coat wrapped tightly around his body and started cursing incessantly. "Let's forget about it for today. Let's leave this place first." Han Shua understood that if Aubrey were to bump into him, he would definitely be pestered endlessly by Aubrey. Han Shua understood that Aubrey was in great pain from the frost poison in his body. Add to that Charles's malicious words from before, Lawrence would definitely lose interest. Lawrence also didn't seem to be in the mood. He nodded and said, "All right, the main reason I brought you to the Rose Garden this time was for that matter. There will be plenty of time to have fun in the future. Some annoying people are always annoying. Let's leave first before they endlessly pester us. Don't go. Detoxify the poison in my body. Otherwise, I won't let you off." Aubrey panted heavily as he stared at Han Shua and yelled. After witnessing Han Shua's strength, the great merchant Cameron seemed to be afraid that Han Shua would suddenly kill him. Therefore, he didn't dare to say anything and only followed behind Aubrey. Han Shua and Lawrence didn't stay any longer. After exiting the Rose Garden, Earth Rider Kino called out loudly. The guards that Lawrence had left outside quickly surrounded him. Aubrey didn't even have time to approach before he was rudely pushed to the side by Kino. Lawrence and Han Shua then boarded the carriage and left the Rose Garden. "All right, I'll leave first. I'll come find you after I receive my graduation certificate." Not long after leaving the Rose Garden, Han Shua said a few words to Lawrence before he jumped off the carriage and left by himself. There were many people protecting Lawrence, both in the open and in the shadows. Han Shuo wasn't worried about Lawrence's safety, so he didn't stay close to protect him. He directly got off the carriage to handle his own matters. After separating from Lawrence, Han Shuo went straight to the tomb in the mountain behind the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. He entered the hidden location where he'd teleported back and forth in the past. Fanny and Phoebe had taken the rebirth pill and needed at least 3 days to adapt. During these 3 days, they would constantly have diarrhea until all the impurities in their bodies had been expelled. During this process, Han Shuo believed that the two girls definitely wouldn't want to see him. This was because a beauty that had been squatting in the toilet all this time would greatly diminish their temperament. Lawrence had already paved a path for Han Shuo, but he needed proof that Han Shuo was an adept necromancer. Han Shuo planned to receive his graduation certificate from the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force the next time he went to see Fanny. Therefore, he had at least 3 days of free time. A lot of things could be done in 3 days. Han Shuo planned to go to the Valley of Sunshine to take a look. Han Shuo returned to the Cemetery of Death through the magic matrix and then used the art of the demonic ninth heavens to fly in the direction of the Valley of Sunshine. Dark Dragon Gilbert had followed Han Shuo's instructions and taken the weapons that Han Shuo had forged from the dwarves to find Trunks when Han Shuo had left the Cemetery of Death. He should have met Trunks by now. Han Shuo, whose strength had greatly increased, flew like a shooting star. Only a faint line could be seen in the sky as he rapidly descended in the direction of the Valley of Sunshine. The dark forest wasn't too far from the Valley of Sunshine. With Han Shuo's current speed, it only took him half a day to arrive at the Valley of Sunshine. Because there were many powers in the surroundings, Han Shuo didn't continue to fly high in the sky. Instead, he flew on the ground and walked according to the address that Trunks had given him. Whoosh whoosh. Suddenly, several sharp arrows pierced through the sky and nailed themselves onto a large tree in front of Han Shuo. Following a rustling sound, nearly 100 bandits walked out from the shrubbery. These bandits were clearly well trained. Most of them were equipped with top-notch weapons, and a small portion of them wore complete armor. From the looks of it, the quality of the armor seemed to be even better than that of the Lancelot Empire's regular army. Nearly 100 bandits had cold and stern expressions on their faces, and an awe-inspiring aura emanated from their bodies. They suddenly surrounded Han Shuo and aimed their bows, crossbows, and spears at him. One of them was a spoiled girl with bright eyes and white teeth. She had a head of fiery red hair and wore leather clothing. She strode out with an arrogant expression and looked at Han Shuo arrogantly. "I've had my eyes on you for a long time. How dare you fly around in our territory? Show me if you have the guts." Han Shuo hadn't released his demons to spy on the surroundings when he was flying through the air. Plus, he hadn't paid too much attention to the dense forest below. As a result, he was surrounded by these bandits. "You must be Miss Janet." "Heh, I'm just an ordinary mage and didn't know that this territory belonged to you." "My apologies." Han Shuo glanced at these people, especially at this unruly girl, and said with a smile, "Looks like you're quite knowledgeable. Who are you and what do you plan on doing here?" The female bandit Janet glared at Han Shuo and questioned him. "I just happened to pass by and don't plan on doing anything bad." "Alright, I still have some matters to attend to. Can you let me go?" Han Shuo had heard a bit about this female bandit Janet from Trunks. He knew that this girl had inherited her family's business. Although her personality was a bit unruly and willful, she wasn't a bad person. Among the many bandits around the Valley of Sunshine, she could be considered a very law-abiding and benevolent bandit. Therefore, Han Shuo didn't want to make things too awkward between them. "Looking at your shifty-eyed face, you shouldn't be a good person. The Valley of Sunshine has been too chaotic recently. Who knows if you're a spy sent by our enemies? Men, capture this guy for me first, then interrogate him carefully." Janet stared at Han Shuo a few times and saw that not only was Han Shuo not afraid, but he even had a cheeky smile on his face. She felt a bit annoyed and ordered the people behind her in a fit of anger. "Where is he? Did you guys lose him? Janet rushed over aggressively, but suddenly realized that she had lost track of Han Shuo. She yelled angrily at the people beside her. This Janet didn't have the gentleness of a young girl in both words and actions. Perhaps it was because she had lived in a bandit's den since she was young that her behavior was completely influenced by bandits. She had a violent temper and behaved in a rough manner. Although she looked gentle and beautiful, she gave off the feeling of a heroic man. Miss, this guy runs faster than a cheetah and is more cunning than a fox. Is he really a mage? An old mage with a lame leg slowly swayed to Janet's side with a levitation spell and said with a wry smile. Old Billy, if he was a swordsman or a knight, would he be able to fly all the way here? Damn it, you're old, but don't tell me your brain is also old. Janet was in a fit of anger. She glared at the crippled mage with her almond-shaped eyes and scolded him angrily. Old Billy wasn't angry after being scolded like that. He just lowered his head and smiled bitterly. Maybe I'm really old, or maybe the times have changed. How can a mage run faster than a cheetah now? I can guarantee that he ran and not used levitation to fly. Heavens, he can't be as special as you, right? Search. This guy must be a spy. He might be a spy from the House of Monroe. Janet didn't pay any more attention to old Mage Billy and shouted at the bandits next to her. No, miss. I can't find him, he's missing. Maybe he's already escaped. All kinds of helpless voices rose and fell around Janet. It was obvious that they couldn't discover Han Shuo's existence. It was evening. Under the big tree where Han Shuo was hiding, only Janet and the old mage named Billy were there. The 7 or 8 bandits that looked like giant bears were more than 10 meters away from Janet, separated by a waist-high shrub and weeds. Suddenly, Han Shuo, who was hiding among the leaves, flew down with a loud laugh. He was already above Janet's head in the blink of an eye. A fist mixed with magical yuan and a surging murderous aura smashed towards Janet. Damn it! Janet cursed and hurriedly pushed Billy away, who was about to chant a spell. She clenched her small fists and shot out a dark green fighting aura towards Han Shuo, who was smashing towards her head and feet. When he saw that the fighting aura was dark green, Han Shuo immediately understood that she should only have the strength of an adept swordsman. He quickly retracted 80% of his magical yuan, and when his fist landed, only 30% of his magical yuan was mixed into his fist. Bam! The dark green fighting aura suddenly scattered under Han Shuo's smash, and then Han Shuo and Janet's little fist collided. An enormous force that could topple the mountains and overturn the seas suddenly surged forth from Janet's little fist, causing Han Shuo's body, which was hanging upside down, to once again be pushed into the air along the trajectory of his fall. How is this possible? Han Shuo couldn't help but cry out in shock as his right hand went numb and stiff. Dark cyan fighting aura was the symbol of a senior swordsman. Based on Han Shuo's experience, she could only withstand 30% of his magical yuan at most. However, when his fist met Janet's, although Janet's fighting aura had scattered, her small fist still erupted with terrifying power. Had it not been for Han Shuo's astonishing physical toughness, this punch would have crippled his entire right arm. According to Han Shuo's understanding, a senior swordsman's dark cyan fighting aura would never be able to cause such great power. This female bandit is a bit strange. Huh. Janet looked at Han Shuo's horrified expression and revealed a proud smile. Then, the space ring in her hand lit up, and a thick black mace that was even larger than her body appeared. She easily gripped the huge mace with her left hand, giggling as she leapt high with the help of the surrounding tree trunks. She swept towards Han Shuo, who hadn't yet landed, and the mace in her hand viciously smashed towards Han Shuo's waist. Han Shuo snorted coldly. He had been kind and merciful just now, but he didn't expect to suffer such a loss. Seeing that Janet was now swinging the mace towards his lower body, Han Shuo was a little angry. His body, which had been unstable due to the great impact, suddenly froze in the air. He also blasted out another punch, smashing towards Janet's mace. There was a loud bang, accompanied by Janet's muffled groan. Her body, which had leapt up with the help of the tree trunks, was ruthlessly smashed down along with the mace. Janet even fell to the ground on her buttocks. It was now her turn to look up at Han Shuo, who was standing proudly in the air, in horror. "Damn it, you're pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger." Janet, who was below, couldn't help but curse. Her breathing was heavy, and she took a few deep breaths. She grabbed the mace, intending to continue. Han Shuo was surprised. He didn't expect Janet to stand up so quickly. Then, before Han Shuo could make a move, a few burly men around him rushed over together. The old magician Billy, who had a lame leg, completed his incantation. A piercingly cold wind whistled over, and bone-piercing wind blades shot out. She was actually a wind element magus. Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment. It could be considered that he had gauged Janet's strength, so he didn't continue to stay here. He flew and hid among the leaves behind him. After a few leaps, he landed on a soft palanquin and took out the demon's lair edge to cut open the roof of the palanquin. Without anyone noticing, he grabbed a dazed girl and flew outside. "Scoundrel, let go of me. Quickly let go of me, or else Janet will definitely not let you off." This girl was beautiful, with crescent-shaped eyebrows and big, bright eyes. Even though she was yelling angrily, her voice still sounded gentle. "Janet, I'm taking this girl away. If you want her, then come to the Soul Destroyer mercenary band." Han Shuo grabbed the girl, ignoring her loud yelling, and laughed as he swaggered off. "Bastard, let go of my wife or else I'll never let you off." Janet was furious as she roared towards the sky. Vulgar words flowed from her mouth without a trace of gentleness that a girl should have. Chapter 258. A precipitous cliff was shrouded in mist and clouds. It was impossible to see the bottom at a glance. The sunset glow was like a burning cloud against the sky, illuminating the precipitous cliff like a large piece of red-hot iron. The cliff was quite a distance from the Valley of Sunshine. Such precipitous cliffs were not uncommon in the Kurlan mountain range. The bare cliff was littered with jagged rocks, devoid of any vegetation. Standing at the top of the cliff, Han Shuo jumped down and descended through the mist. In the span of a breath, he landed on a large protruding rock. This rock was in the middle of the cliff and was surrounded by thick white mist. The rock protruded horizontally, forming a large flat area. Although it was a bit steep, it wasn't dangerous as long as one was careful. "Who's there?" A startled cry rang out as a brawny, bare-chested, bearded man stared at Han Shuo with ill intent, holding a sharp axe forged by the dwarves. "I'm looking for Trunks," Han Shuo said with a smile. The Soul Destroyer mercenary band was situated on a broad piece of flat land protruding from the bottom of the cliff. On this piece of flat land that was filled with floating clouds and mist, the dense mist did not spread to the center for some unknown reason. However, the flat land was a vast expanse of whiteness, appearing extremely bizarre. Rows of bamboo houses were scattered across the flat area. Many half-naked mercenaries were practicing martial arts on a practice field the size of a football field. There were also some spacious caves dug out at the back that could also be used as rooms for people to stay in. This flat area was rather miraculous. It was filled with thick mist above and below, and only a simple soundproof boundary had been set up in the center. With the thick mist as a natural barrier, no one would be able to discover this flat area covered in thick mist. But in the middle of the flat area, the air was fresh and the thick mist was nowhere to be seen. It was truly a quiet and secluded place. The gentle girl in Han Shuo's hands had already been restrained by him. She couldn't see or hear. When Han Shuo landed on the flat area, he immediately sensed Dark Dragon Gilbert's presence. "Honored Master, you've finally arrived." In the middle of the training field, Gilbert's skin was as dark as coal. His muscles were black and shiny. He threw away the two mercenaries that were entangled with him and ran towards Han Shuo while shouting. The strong man who was holding a sharp axe and looking at Han Shuo with an unfriendly expression immediately grinned when he saw Gilbert calling Han Shuo master. He said in a friendly manner, "Your weapon is very useful, thank you." As Han Shuo had provoked both the Church of Light and the Calamity Church, Han Shuo didn't let Trunks reveal his identity in order to guard against the two churches. To these mercenaries, Han Shuo was only a good friend of Trunks and didn't know the real inside story. "You're welcome. Where is Trunks?" Han Shuo nodded and asked the burly man. "He's out on business and should be back tonight." "Honored master, you've finally returned." Gilbert's upper body was bare as he yelled all the way. Many of the mercenaries on the flat area could hear his voice that sounded like a broken gong. Many came out of their bamboo houses and caves to look at Han Shuo in amazement. Gilbert must have stayed here for a while. With his tyrannical body as a dark dragon, even if he transformed into a human, these mercenaries still wouldn't be able to deal with him. It seemed that during this period of time, Gilbert must have established a strong image among these people. Such a powerful character calling Han Shuo the master, in such a humble manner immediately shocked the mercenaries on the flat area. Grant's muscles were very large as he held the broadsword in his hand, but some of the smaller muscles weren't obvious. With his physique, this kind of muscle mass could possess powerful explosive power, but his speed would inevitably be affected. On the other hand, Han Shuo's every muscle was so clearly coordinated. Even the two sides of his waist, where it was most difficult for muscles to appear, were as if they had been carved by a knife and axe. This kind of perfectly coordinated muscle shape was most suitable for battle. Grant also revealed an astonished expression. He stared blankly for a moment when he saw that Han Shuo had come empty-handed. He casually tossed the great sword in his hand to the side and yelled in defiance, "Then, we won't use fighting aura. Let's compete purely with the toughness of our bodies." "As you wish." Han Shuo laughed heartily and strode towards Grant, not using any demonic yuan. Grant was overjoyed. He didn't wait for Han Shuo to come near and sped up. His 1.9-meter-tall body charged ferociously at Han Shuo, grinning as he clenched his fists and punched straight at Han Shuo. To everyone's surprise, the approaching Han Shuo didn't move at all. He stared blankly at the incoming iron fist with a strange smile on his face. Boom! A muffled sound like that of a war drum came from within Han Shuo's body. Grant's powerful punch landed on Han Shuo's chest, but Han Shuo's body didn't move. Even the smile on his face didn't change. "Oh, my gosh, is your body made of steel?" On the contrary, Grant, who had punched Han Shuo, was grimacing in pain as he shook his fist, an expression of unspeakable pain. "Ha ha!" Han Shuo's hand shot out like lightning, grabbing onto Grant's shoulder and flinging him away. The 1.9-meter-tall burly man flew up like a feather, swinging a few meters in the air and landing right on top of a wide, soft cushion. Casually sweeping a glance at the mercenaries beside him, Han Shuo said in a carefree manner, "Is there anyone else who wants to try? Whether it's physical attacks, fighting aura, or magic, I can keep you company." When these words were spoken, the mercenaries of the Soul Destroyer mercenary band were all dumbfounded. They stared at Han Shuo in shock, but not a single person stood out. "Waha, you idiots actually want to compete with my master in terms of physical strength. In the forbidden area of the Dark Forest, my great master had even beaten the Golden Dragon, who was known to have the strongest physical body, to the ground. You fellows are really crazy." Gilbert shouted proudly, causing the group of mercenaries, who were already surprised, to be even more dumbfounded. "Great master, it's fine if you come, but why did you bring me a woman? You're becoming more and more considerate now." Gilbert yelled and suddenly discovered the woman that Han Shuo had carelessly thrown to the side. He walked over excitedly. "Stop, you can't touch this woman. I have great use for her. She belongs to the female bandit Janet. I still need to rely on her to have a good chat with Janet." Han Shuo glared at Gilbert and berated. Gilbert immediately became well-behaved when Han Shuo yelled. At this moment, the sound of wind rustling came from the top of the cliff. After a while, Han Shuo descended from above with Odysseus and the others. "Ah, you've finally arrived," Trunks immediately said with a smile when he saw Han Shuo. As he walked towards Han Shuo, his gaze unintentionally swept over and he suddenly stared dumbfoundedly at the girl that Han Shuo had swept over. His expression was extremely strange. After a while, Trunks involuntarily cried out "Annie," and charged towards the girl as if he'd gone mad. Some of the original members of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band were first wild with joy, but then looked at the girl with some confusion, murmuring, "Something's not right." There'll definitely be a fierce battle at the silver mine tonight. I've come back to bring some people to join in the fun and see if we can fish up some benefits. Trunks stood on the cliff and explained to Han Shuo from the flat land that was curled up by the clouds. Startled, Han Shuo said, "Silver mines are already very rare, and mithril is a top-quality material for forging weapons and armor. No wonder everyone's eyes are red with greed. It looks like this fierce battle is unavoidable." That's right. Even in a place like the Valley of Sunshine, mithril is a priceless item. The value of a silver mine with mithril is simply immeasurable. Therefore, as long as the powers in the Valley of Sunshine have some power, they all want to head to that mountain valley for a share. The merchant who discovered the silver mine was instead killed at the first opportunity. It's a pity that the news still leaked out. Trunks nodded in agreement and said in a low voice, "Let's go, we'll also go take a look. If there aren't any accidents, Janet will also appear in that mountain valley." Han Shuo thought for a moment and suggested to Trunks. "Yes, that's what I was thinking as well." Trunks replied. Afterwards, the group of 30 or so people silently left the cliff and headed towards their destination according to Trunks' directions. The mercenaries that Trunks had brought with him were mostly experienced and extraordinary members of the Soul Destroyer mercenary band. Each and every one of them didn't forget to check their equipment on the way, vigilantly paying attention to their surroundings and carefully avoiding other groups of people. When the sky had completely darkened and the crescent moon had yet to appear, Trunks stopped behind a boulder and pointed to a mountain valley densely covered in creepers. He said to Han Shuo, "That's the one. I think that all the major powers in the Valley of Sunshine have already entered. I'm afraid that there are countless small powers like us who want to make a fortune. It's a bit impossible to hide without being discovered. The others stay here. You, me, and Gilbert will go in first. Follow me. As long as we're careful, no one will discover us." Han Shuo turned around and calmly instructed Trunks. Trunks had long since witnessed Han Shuo's miraculous abilities. He immediately turned around and instructed Grant and the others, "Uncle Grant, you guys hide here for the time being. We'll go in and scout. I'll send a secret signal to inform you if anything happens." As well-trained veteran mercenaries, they wouldn't have any objections to their leader's orders once they started moving. Grant nodded and said in a low voice, "Understood. Follow me." Han Shuo called out softly and bent his body level with the shrubs. He took the lead and walked out. The 3 Yin demons filled the surroundings, taking in all the movements. However, someone like Trunks, who looked at things with common sense, cried out in surprise when he saw the little skull's strange actions. "Leader, what's wrong?" Grant and the others hurried over from outside as Trunks stared dumbly at the little skull's departing figure. Grant couldn't help but ask when he saw Trunks' strange expression. "No, nothing's wrong. Come down with me." Trunks shook his head with a wry smile and waved his hand at Grant, then jumped down into the tunnel. The Earth Elite zombie was very intelligent. When it saw Trunks jump down, it walked into the depths of the darkness and helped Trunks lead the way. What's going on? Why is there a tunnel?" Grant couldn't help but turn pale with fright when he saw a dark, bottomless tunnel. "Don't ask so much, let's go." Gilbert shouted and followed Trunks into the tunnel. The group of mercenaries were all scratching their heads in confusion. After staring blankly for a while, they entered the tunnel one after another. When everyone had entered, the tunnel's exit magically closed, leaving no trace behind. At this moment, the valley was a complete mess. More than 100 elites from the four great powers of the Valley of Sunshine had suddenly started fighting. When Han Shuo, eager to make a move, approached the area, he discovered that the situation had taken an unimaginable turn, completely out of his expectations. Originally, because of the Earth Elite Zombies' sudden disturbance, the other three powers had charged towards the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band. Among them, the Cairo Mercenary Band had taken the lead, and Loredan was as valiant as a god of war, slaughtering the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band as if he was invincible. Even if the Cairo Mercenary Band had the advantage in numbers, if the House of Menlo and the Katar Orc tribe had attacked together, the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band would still be in trouble. However, the real situation wasn't like this. The House of Menlo and the Katar Orc tribe experts who had charged over with Loredan and the Cairo Mercenary Band suddenly changed sides when they approached the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band. Following Adam Monroe and Katar's roars, the experts from both sides had instead surrounded and killed the Cairo Mercenary Band. Waha, Loredan, oh Loredan, you can't imagine this, can you? The real target of today's battle is your Cairo Mercenary Band. It's rare for you to leave the Valley of Sunshine, so don't even think about going back, huh? Florida of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band suddenly laughed wildly. His voice was loud and clear as he floated in the air, spreading to every corner of the valley. Times have changed, the Cairo Mercenary Band has been in charge of the Valley of Sunshine for too long. You should move your position no matter what. Adam Menlo, the patriarch of the House of Menlo, also spoke in a sinister voice as he flew towards Loredan on the back of his golden rock. The situation had suddenly taken an astonishing turn. Chapter 262. Ha, Florida, we meet again. Han Shuo's eyes were crimson red as he laughed sinisterly, as if he had been possessed by a demon. Once a person in the bloodlust realm went berserk, they would logically lose their mind and sink into a state of endless slaughter. They wouldn't be able to face their surroundings with a clear mind. However, Han Shuo and the Demon's Lair Edge had absorbed an enormous amount of killing intent during their last trip to the Forbidden Area. The pure energy had merged with the demon infant and seemed to have a miraculous effect. Having fallen into the bloodlust realm this time, Han Shuo could feel the killing aura swirling around his body. Most of the negative emotions of hatred, fear, and violence had been absorbed by the Demon's Lair Edge within his body. What swirled around his body was mostly pure killing aura. Those negative emotions were the main culprit that caused Han Shuo to lose his sense of self and consciousness once he entered the bloodlust realm. When those negative emotions were absorbed by the Demon's Lair Edge, although Han Shuo's boundless desire for blood and slaughter didn't diminish, his tenacious will allowed his mind to regain clarity. It wasn't like when he was in the Forbidden Area, where he almost killed Gilbert without distinguishing between friend and foe. You can't escape. You must die today. Kill him for me. Florida retreated far away until he thought he was in a safe place before saying hatefully, "You didn't die." On Florida's side, Grand Magus Ferguson of the Church of Light looked at Han Shuo in shock and yelled, "You haven't died yet, how could I be that fast?" Ha. Han Shuo threw his head back and cackled strangely. He was like an eagle spreading its wings and soaring high. A thick stench of blood spread from his body, forming an area filled with a bloody mist with him as the center. A terrifying and ruthless aura exploded from that area. The energy of the experts who had just died and hadn't disappeared were all drawn and gathered by the bloody mist. Han Shuo's aura grew stronger and stronger, like a red cloud of fire, enveloping the light Grand Magus Ferguson. What magic is this? Even with Ferguson's insight, he still couldn't understand Han Shuo's method of attack. However, he could instinctively feel the danger. The magic staff in his hand flashed brilliantly as the light magic Illuminate was released. He, like Florida, hastily dodged backwards. When the light magic Illuminate was released, it was as if a scorching sun had appeared out of nowhere in the sky. A large ball of blinding light surged towards Han Shuo with a pure and holy power. It was a pity that universal illumination, which had the ability to dispel evil, had no effect at all on the strange noises caused by Han Shua's magical yuan. Han Shua's presence grew stronger and stronger as the people below died tragically. A large patch of bloody mist covered the area, and the 7 or 8 rainbow sickle mercenaries below suddenly felt an evil energy surge into their bodies. They all cried out in pain as their bodies swelled and exploded. "You, just who are you? You're even more evil than the Calamity Church, I won't let you go." The 7 or 8 rainbow sickle mercenaries didn't have any resistance at all as their bodies exploded in an instant. This made Ferguson furious as he pointed at Han Shua and roared. "Old fart, I reminded you last time, but you didn't listen." Although Han Shua's mind had returned to normal in the bloodlust realm, he still couldn't suppress his desire to kill. He commanded the demonic cloud to envelop the rainbow sickle mercenary band with a cruel voice. A banner of blood fluttered in the air as the thick, murderous aura around Han Shua's body surged into it. The banner released a thick mist of blood that was entwined with the image of 100 evil spirits baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Florida had expended so much effort this time, even willingly giving up the mithril mine, just to kill Lordan and allow the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band to control the Valley of Sunshine. He naturally couldn't let Lordan leave. After Florida's roar, the remaining 30 or so Rainbow Sickle mercenary band experts and Florida all chased after Lordan. Andy, who had flown into the sky with Asa to deal with Han Shua, looked at Han Shua standing proudly in the sky and finally turned to chase after Lordan with Florida. However, Asa, whose arm had been severed by Han Shua with the demon's lair edge, didn't listen to Florida's orders. He continued to stare fiercely at Han Shua and flew towards Han Shua with the patriarch of the House of Menlo, Adam Menlo. Behind Asa was Grand Magus Ferguson, who had released the radiance of light. He was also hovering in the air like a willow leaf as he floated over. "Shoot!" Adam Menlo rode on the golden rock and wielded a dazzling golden spear as he aggressively charged towards Han Shua. At the same time, he ordered the experts below him. The experts of the House of Menlo had been killed by Lordan's Berserker Axe and Han Shua's necromancy magic. There were only 30 or so people left. Under Adam Menlo's orders, bolts of crossbow bolts and spinning axes shot towards Han Shua, who was standing high in the sky. The 3 Yin demons enveloped the entire scene, and Han Shua could clearly see any abnormality. When the experts of the House of Menlo flew into the sky, a trace of a disdainful smile appeared on Han Shua's lips. He only looked down with a cold smile and didn't take any action. Just as the arrows were about to hit Han Shua, who'd been standing proudly in the sky, suddenly transformed into 4 people. The 4 Han Shua looked exactly the same and moved in 4 different directions, respectively charging towards Ferguson, Adam Menlo, Asa, and the members of the House of Menlo below. The ballista bolts and spinning axes from the House of Menlo below suddenly missed. They didn't even touch the corner of Han Shua's clothes. What's going on? How did it become 4 people? Damn it, am I seeing things? The experts of the House of Menlo exclaimed in disbelief. Ferguson and the other 2 also didn't know what was going on. As mages, Ferguson and Asa dodged instinctively. Only Adam Menlo, who was riding on the golden rock and wielding the golden spear, attacked the Han Shua in front of him even though he was equally shocked. At this moment, a series of whistling sounds pierced through the air. 7 bone spurs shining with a cold glint shot towards the golden-winged rock beneath Adam Menlo from all directions. On top of a huge rock, the little skull stood proudly. His purple demon eye glowed brightly as he firmly locked onto the golden rock beneath Adam Menlo. Under the little skeleton's control, the 7 bone spurs spun in a strange trajectory. As they flew towards the wings of the golden-winged rock, the 7 bone spurs shone with a brilliant jade light. They were as sharp and cold as 7 bright snow blades.